Hello everybody and welcome to video number 15 in my series of Richard Laymon horror novel reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about Out Are the Lights from 1982. I don't usually do these videos in chronological order. The previous video I did was The Woods Are Dark from 1981 and this is the book he wrote after that. But I did want to do his next book for this video because I had been very critical of The Woods Are Dark. And Laymon himself thinks that that book was a major factor in his lack of popularity in America. So I was interested to see how did he recover from it? What did he do after that experience? And what he did after was this little number, Out Are the Lights from 82. So the cover art is there, and it's not by Steve Crisp, this one. It's by a guy called Mark Taylor. I could be wrong about this, but I think this is the only cover art he ever did for this Hodder headline feature Richard Laymon editions, and I like it a lot. It looks random, but it's not. It is actually a scene from the novel. The spine is there. The book isn't as long. The novel, sorry, Out Are the Lights, isn't as long as it may look because there are 5 or 6 short stories thrown in at the end of this. The actual novel is one of his shorter ones. And here's the back, which says, "The vampire movie came first. The girl died in a welter of blood as the vampire bit clean through her jugular. The Inquisition came next. The victim confessed all as the spider crawled over her naked body. Then came the story of the Axeman. This was the horror movie series to end them all. Cinema buffs particularly admired the grainy amateurish camera work. It suggested the action was the real thing. But it couldn't be, could it? Well, yes, it could, because the story of this is that there's these 3 guys, Todd, who is the mastermind, the director, the writer, Otto Schreck, who is the star, an actor, and Bruno Blood, presumably a pseudonym, who is the owner of a cinema. And they've come up with this idea to film actual murders and tortures and redub them to make them look like horror film shorts, to cut out all the real names and really what the victims are saying, and make it just appear like a low-budget, kind of shot-on-video, amateurish horror film, 15 minutes long, which they then sell to the cinema. A little far-fetched, obviously, but that's Laymon, and I like it a lot. This was a fun read. I really enjoyed it a lot. The 2 main characters who guide us through the action is a woman called Connie, and she falls in love, obviously. It's Richard Laymon. She instantly falls in love with a private detective called Pete. I liked their relationship after the debacle of The Woods Are Dark and how completely unrealistic all of that was. It was nice to be back in a pleasant group of characters who were, by Laymon standards, real people and behaved in a realistic way. There's a subplot involving Connie's ex-boyfriend and some crazy woman he's hooked up with called Elizabeth. And that subplot, I suppose it does add to the plot in some ways. It's necessary, but even if it didn't, it's still a funny little thread to have going on, because this Elizabeth really is pretty unhinged, and what she's doing to her husband, because she's married, is one of those Laymon-y things which only his warped imagination would come up with, I think. So that was good. And plot-wise, this is a very readable book. I was never bored by this. It's a plot that allows Richard Laymon to do something that he does very well, which is to slip inside his narratives they feel like short stories. And because of the plot of this, Laymon describes these little horror films that are being made, not each and every, but about 6 of these murders that are being filmed and dressed up as horror film shorts. He describes what's going on, and some of them are great. Some spoilers in this review will be from now on, so if you haven't read the book, I recommend you do. Go and do it, then maybe come back and hear my thoughts on it. But there's one short film which involves these 2 young women who are camping who get bumped off. I really like that one, the way that it was set up. I also really like the one at the end involving the cowboy and the Indian, and that contains a big reveal of the plot, which was really well done, I thought. And one thing that needs to be said about this book is that Connie, the main character, she's deaf, and how Laymon reveals that fact is good. And her deafness ends up playing a huge role in the ending, in the plot. And that leads me on to the two negatives of this novel, which I'll talk about. If anyone has read it, then this is where I'm just giving my opinions, and maybe you can see if you agree or disagree. The first thing is that Connie's ability to lip read ends up being very important, because at the end of the novel, she's watching one of these short films and she understands that what these girls on screen are actually saying. This one girl is saying that this is real, this is not a film, these men are actually torturing and murdering me, please get help, my name is Britt Anderson. That's what Connie can see her lips saying, but what they've dubbed over is not that. They've dubbed it to make it seem like it's just a trashy horror film, and it's not real. That's a rare example of something that isn't just far-fetched, it's completely unrealistic, because how likely is it that in a cinema of 200 and odd patrons, we're told that's how many are there, you don't need to read lips to know that there is a wild difference between somebody saying, my name is Britt Anderson, please get help, and somebody, the dubbed lines, which are nothing like that. You don't need to be deaf and a lip reader to know that someone is clearly not saying what it looks like they're saying. That was the first one. And the second one, major spoiler here. So switch this off now if you're planning to read the book first. I really didn't like that. If I'm understanding the ending correctly, and I think I am, it's another very rushed one, but I think I got it. 2 of the 3 guys in this book are let go, and I didn't like that at all, because they've done horrific things, and Laymon usually makes sure people get their comeuppance in his novels. Awful people usually meet awful ends in Richard Laymon's books. That's one of the great things about them. But if I am understanding the ending correctly here, Otto Schreck dies, but Todd and Bruno are let go. In fact, they become complicit in Connie's revenge upon her ex-boyfriend and his lover. This book would be rated so much higher by me if he had just wrapped that up a little bit more satisfactorily. If Connie had killed all of those guys who were doing these terrible things to people. But 2 negatives is major progress when you consider how I was very critical of his previous book, The Woods Are Dark. So it's highly recommended. As a simple read, this isn't a game changer in the genre. This isn't a masterpiece. It's not one of Richard Laymon's best books even, but it's just it was his 3rd published book, and I think it shows a massive jump in his ability to pace and control a narrative, to write a satisfactory story, to engage the reader over The Woods Are Dark, the previous one. It's nice to see that he wasn't put off by that experience, and he came back with a bang, so to speak, with one of his best ideas. I love the idea of this. As someone who spent a lot of his youth in kind of crappy cinemas in the northwest of England, watching, again, crappy horror films usually, this was a nostalgic thing for me. And I just know that Laymon shares this love as well. Throughout this book, Laymon peppers it with quotes from references to Edgar Allan Poe. He seems to be very taken by a Poe poem called The Conqueror Worm, because this is like the 3rd or 4th novel so far during this summer reread where he's used that poem. So, and in fact, the title of the piece, Out Are the Lights, comes from that poem. Now, when this book was first published in 1982, it was only the novel Out Are the Lights, but for its re-release, or its new editions later, in the late 80s, early 90s, they threw in, that's how long the novel is, and then this section of it is And Other Tales. I'm sorry, let's go back a bit. And Other Tales. And what they've done here, the publishers, is something which I think is a fantastic idea. They've thrown in 5 short stories. And if you were going to do that for a Richard Laymon book, this would be the one to do it, because, like I said, the novel itself is told almost in a series of interlinking short stories. I'm not going to talk about the short stories. At the end of this novel review series, maybe I will do a separate video talking about all of his short stories. He has 2 volumes of them, plus the ones in this, and a bunch of other ones that weren't collected. But all I'll say is that they are all fun. All of those 5 are nice and nasty. But the novel itself, Out Are the Lights, really, really good. Highly recommended. Give it a read. You'll do it in one sitting, as you will a lot of his early work. One note about what I just said, early work. When I think of Richard Laymon's career, I tend to divide it into 3 phases. His early work, his classic period, and his late period. When I talk about his early work, what I'm referring to is his 6 first published novels. That's The Cellar, The Woods Are Dark, this one, Out Are the Lights, Night Shift, Beware, and All Hallows Eve. In my opinion, those 6 short books are very definitely his early work, and everything after that, from the Beast House onwards, begins his classic period. This, in my opinion, is, leaving aside the cellar, which is part of a wider narrative, and I like it for that reason. In my opinion, this is the best of his early work. So give it a try, give it a read. Alright everyone, that's going to do it for this one, not much else to say about it. Thanks very much for watching if you did watch this far, and I'll be back soon with another novel. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.